Hi, welcome to my video on the review of the square root function. And as in all my other reviews, the square root function is treated as a quiz. And this one is marked at a 45. So we total up the scores on each page at the bottom, and we get them all done. We add up the totals and we put it over 45, convert it to a decimal, and then move your decimal 2 places to the right to get a percent. So this is the first page in 1 out of 4. So let's start the review of the unit on square root function. Number 1, the basic or the parent equation of the square root function is y equals root x. Give yourself a mark if you have it right. Now let's graph y equals root x. So the basic table of values that I use is 0, 1, 4, and 9. And we put 0 in, you get a 0. Put a 1 in, square root of 1 is 1. Square root of 4 is 2. And square root of 9 is 3. And if we graph all those points, we get 0, 0, 1, 1, 4, 2, 4, give me a 2, and 9, give me a 3. And as you can see, it starts and goes like that. And there's the table of values, the points graphed. And the domain, notice the values of x start as 0 and go greater, so x is greater than or equal to 0. And if you wanted to do the interval notation, it starts at 0 and it's going greater, so it's going towards positive infinity. And the y values start as 0 and go greater. Notice, again, let's refer to the domain or the values of x, d and y. D is before r, x is before y. And the values of x start as 0 and go to the right, so it's going to infinity. The values of y start as 0. You can see in the table of values are getting bigger. Or you can look in the graph, the values of y in the graph starts as 0 and goes up. So y is greater than or equal to 0. And it's the same notation for domain and range. So 1 for the table, 1 for the graph, 1 for the domain, 1 for the range. Give yourself 4 marks. 4 marks. Number 3, match each equation. So I got a mapping rule and I have an equation. So this mapping rule, and it's on the, as you can see, it's on the square root equation or the radical equation. So there's no change in the x, but the y is y minus 1. So the y minus 1 is number 4. There's no change in the x. The x's, remember the equation is y equals root x. So there's no change in the x, but there's 1 subtracted from the y. And this one has negative x, y, so that means the x is changed and not the y, so the x is changed to a negative, so that's number 5. So the x is changed but not the y. And c, x minus 1 comma y, notice the x is a minus 1, the y is not changed. So because the x is a minus 1, that means it has to be a plus 1 in the equation. So that's number 2. And d, the x is not changed, but the y is doubled. So that's the vertical stretch of 2. So that's number 1. The y is doubled. So whatever the x is, you're doubling the x to get the y value. So y is being doubled. And in e, the x is no change, but the y is the negative. So the negative of y will give you this one. The negative is outside, so that's number 3. And f, mapping rule, we have a half with the x. So that's the reciprocal. The y is not changed. So the reciprocal is half x, so that means it's doubled inside. So the doubling on the inside is number 6 right here. And again, when I say the y is not changed, the y is here. Looking at here, The y is not changed. The x is not changed, only the y is doubled. And again, as you can see here, just look at these two. The y, the x is not changed. No, nothing is happening inside the root. But the y is, in this equation, this y here is the opposite of this one. Because you can go, put the negative on the y. So if you put the negative on the y and do that, then you divide by -1, then you get this equation here. And for each mark you have right, give yourself a score of 6. State the transformation on the basic graph for each. That's the square root equation or radical equation. The transformation, I have a negative, so that's a reflection. It's reflected in the x-axis. So the y is opposite, so it's being reflected, it's going down. And it's the x is inside the brackets, so it's opposite. So that's a +2 here. So that's 2 right. And on the outside, the y is added, 3 is added, so it's 3 up. That's the transformation. Give yourself a mark if you have that right. And in this one, according to the transformation, the x is changing. Notice the x is changed to the opposite. So if the x is changed, changing the x reflects in the y-axis. And there's a vertical stretch of, this is 4 times this value. So that means you have a vertical stretch of 4. And the y is minus, you're taking 1 away from the y. So it's 1 down. So if you have all this correct, you get a mark. If you have all this correct, you get a mark. Total up your page is out of 13. Number 5, write an equation for the transformation on this y equals root x, which is the square root equation. So we don't have any reflections because there's no vertical reflection, no horizontal reflection. We do have a horizontal translation. We do have a horizontal stretch, horizontal translation, and a vertical translation. So there's no vertical translation, no reflections. So we do the root. The horizontal stretch is the opposite, so that's a 3. And the horizontal translation is 6 left, so that's a -6. So that's a x plus 6. And we have a vertical translation of 2 up, so that's a +2, so that's 2 added on to the equation. So if you have this equation, or you could have the square root of 3x plus 18 plus 2. Either one of these would do. Give yourself a mark. Reflected in the y-axis. If you reflect in the y-axis, that means the x is changing. It's reflected in the y and the x-axis, so it's the negative on the outside, and it's a negative on the inside. It's reflected in both. Negative inside is reflected. If you've got a negative in here, it's reflected in the y. If you have a negative in here, it's reflected in the x. With a vertical stretch of 6, so that's outside 6 times, and a horizontal translation of 7 right. So that's 7 right is a +7, so that's an x minus 7. So the equation could be -6 square root of -x plus 7, or it could be this one here. Either one of these two will do. Give yourself another mark. The domain of the square root equation is x is greater than or equal to 0. And again, if you want this notation, which is the interval notation, it will be that. And the range, y is greater than or equal to 0. And it's the same notation. So that means the x's are starting as 0 and going to the right, and the y's are starting as 0 and going up. Give yourself 1 mark each. Now, what is the domain of this square root equation? Well, what I do is I will say that whatever is on the inside of the bracket, I make it greater than or equal to 0. So that means x is greater than or equal to 2. So x is greater than or equal to 2. And again, this is square bar because 2 is included, going to positive infinity. So either one of these will do. Give yourself a mark. And the range is on the outside, so it's y, and we got a negative 3 on the outside. Notice that this is a plus, that means it's going up, so it's going to be greater than or equal to negative 3. You could have that, or you could have negative 3 is going greater, so it's going to be positive infinity. So either one of these will do, this one or this one. Give yourself a mark. Number 8, state the starting point of this square root equation. So the starting point, you have to get the opposite of what's in the bracket. So that's a 6, and the outside stays the same. Note, when you let x equal 6, this becomes a 0. Negative 2 times 0 is 0, so y is 9. So 6 gives me a 0, and then we get the 9. 1 mark per 6, 9. Number 9, state the domain of this function. So notice this starting point here is negative 2, and y is 1. So the x's are starting at negative 2, and they're going to the right, so it's greater than equal to. And again, that's negative 2, comma, positive infinity. Either or will do. And the range is starting at 1. The range values are starting at 1. The y values is the range, and they're going down. So y is less than or equal to 1. And we go the other way this time. We got a square bracket with a 1, and we're going to negative infinity. And this is a round bracket, not a square bracket. So notice because the range is, the y's are going down. It's going from 1, starting at 1 and going down. So down is as if the numbers are going 1, 0, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, they're going down. So mark each. Number 10, we have an equation y equals the square root of x minus 1, the square root of x minus 1, subtract 2. Use the mapping rule to graph this. So the mapping rule, so x comma y, this is an x minus 1, so it's an x plus 1, and the y value is negative 2, so it's y subtract 2. So the mapping rule is x plus 1, y minus 2. And if we do according to the mapping rule, the basic equation is y equals root x, which is, I go with 0, 1, 4, 9. The square root of 0 is 0, square root of 1 is 1, square root of 4 is 2, square root of 9 is 3. That's the table I use. So I take these values of x and plug them in here. I'm going to add 1 to each one of these values of x. So 0 plus 1 is, so this is x plus 1. This is y minus 2, so I'm going to add 1. 1, add 1, add 1, add 1. And the y values are going to take away 2. So 0 subtract 2 is negative 2. 1 subtract 2 is negative 1. 2 subtract 2 is 0. And 3 subtract 2 is 1. And so let's graph. The graph is 1, negative 2. X is 1, y is negative 2. X is 2, y is negative 1. X is 2, y is negative 1. X is 5, y is 0. X is 5, y is 0. And x is 10, y is 1. X is 10, y is 1. So there's the graph representing that equation. There it is. So notice the basic graph moved 1 to the right. Basic graph was 0, 0, move 1 to the right and down 2. All points move 1 to the right and down 2. So give yourself 5 marks. If you wrote mapping rule correctly, you give yourself a mark. If you do this table of values, give yourself a mark. If you plug this in correctly and got this table of values, give yourself a mark. And if you did the graph correctly, give yourself 2, 5 marks altogether. And that's 14 for that page total. Hopefully everything's going well. If not, what mistakes you make, look back at the videos, because all the videos are done in order. Now we have the last page. Solve these equations. So what you do, the rule is if you've got an equation with a radical, you isolate the radical. So you get x plus 1 equals 1 plus 2. Square root of x plus 1 equals 3. After you have the radical isolated, then you square both sides. So the square root of x plus 1 all squared is x plus 1 equals 9. X equals 9 minus 1. X equals 8. So what we have to do is check x equals 8 to make sure it's okay. So 8 plus 1 minus 2 equals 1. So that's the square root of 9 minus 2 equals 1. Square root of 9 is 3 minus 2 equals 1. So 1 equals 1, correct? So that's your solution. So if you have this equation right here, you give yourself a mark. If you have this equation squared correctly, you give yourself a mark. If you have the answer, 8, you give yourself a mark. 3 marks altogether. Number 12, we have the square root of 2x plus 7 minus x equals 2. Again, we have to isolate the root by itself. The minus x moves on to become a plus x. After we have that done, then we square both sides and be isolated. So the root of 2x plus 7 squared is 2x plus 7. And we got x plus 2 all squared. So let's do the shortcut. X times x is x squared. 2 times 2 is 4. Multiply those two to get 2x and double it, so it's a plus 4x. Or you can do FOIL. X plus 2 times x plus 2, first, outside, inside, last. Now that we have this equation, and I find I can move the x over, but it's just as quick to move everything to the right side to keep the x squared positive. So I'm moving, normally I would move all the x's to the left side you can, but if I move everything to the right side, I keep the x squared positive, and I like the x squared to be positive. Okay, done. Now I could move it the other way. I can move the x squared over here and make it negative, move the 4 over and make it negative, move the 4x over and make it negative, move the 4 over and make it negative, and then I got a negative, so I get a negative x squared, so I would multiply by negative 1, and I would come up with this equation. Only all of this trinomial would be on the left side and 0 would be on the right. And this is factorable. X squared is x and x. Factors, product is negative 3, so the factors are 3 and 1. Product is negative, the sum is positive, so it's a positive 3, negative 1. X plus 3 equals 0. X minus 1 equals 0. X is negative 3, or X is 1. Excuse me. Notice also we have two answers, but we have to check, because remember, when we square a radical, we sometimes get extraneous roots. So let's take x equals negative 3 and plug into the equation. So 2 negative 3 plus 7 minus x is negative 3 equals 2. So let's work out the inside of this. So that's negative 6 plus 7 is a 1. Double negative is a positive. So 1 plus 3 equals 2. 4 equals 2. So 1 doesn't work. Sorry, negative 3. And negative 3 is a 6. A double negative. Got to make sure. Yep, 4. So negative 3 don't work. So let's try x equals 1. Let's put 1 in the equation. So 2, 1 plus 7 minus 1 equals 2. That becomes 2 plus 7 is a 9. Minus 1 equals 2. 3 minus 1 equals 2. 2 equals 2. It works. So negative 3 is not a solution. So x equals 1 is the only answer, because the negative 3 didn't make the equation true. Remember, squaring might give you an extraneous root, so you got to be careful. You got to check both of them. And we have 7 marks. So if you came up with this equation right here, give yourself a mark. If you came up with this equation here, you give yourself a mark. If you came up with this equation, you give yourself a mark. If you got a factor, you give yourself a mark. If you have these answers right here, you give yourself a mark. And if you picked out, if you eliminated this one, you give yourself a mark. If you picked up the 1 as the answer. So 7 of total altogether. Count them up. Make sure. 7. And number 13, we have a double radical. So what I do when I have a double radical, I separate, I put 1 on one side and 1 on the other. Because notice here I have 1 square root, so I squared once. Because you have 2 square roots and you separate them, you're going to have to square twice. So let's square this equation and square this side and this side. The root of 2x plus 3 squared, all squared, is 2x plus 3. Now, I'm going to write this down because it might be a bit confusing, but just to make sure. There it is, I doubled it. I'm going to do FOIL. So the root of x minus 2 times the root of x minus 2 is x minus 2. And 2 times the root of x minus 2 is 2 root x minus 2. 2 times this root of x minus 2 is 2 root x minus 2. And 2 times 2 gives me a 4. Let's simplify this side, and I get, let's see, I get an x, and minus 2 plus 4 is a plus 2. And we add these up, we get 4. 4x minus 2. 2 and 2 makes 4. We're adding like terms. Now we'll move 2x minus x plus 3 minus 2 equals 4 root x minus 2. I moved all the x's to this side and I kept the radical by itself. That gives me x plus 1 equals 4 root x minus 2. So I have a radical left, so again I have to square both sides to get rid of the radical. So I'm going to square x plus 1 squared is x squared, x times x. 1 times 1 is 1. Product is 1x doubled is a 2x. Now I'm going to square this term here. So 4 times 4 is 16. The root of x minus 2 times the root of x minus 2 is x minus 2. So I'm going to simplify that. 16x minus 32. And that gives me x squared plus 2x minus 16x plus 1 plus 32 equals 0. X squared minus 14x plus 33 equals 0. So is this factorable? Let's check. X squared is x and x, and the product is 33. So 33, the product is 33. So I have a 1 and a 33, or I have a 3 and 11. And 3 and 11 will give me a 14. Product is positive 33. So I have to have 2 pluses or 2 minuses. So the sum is negative. So I've got a negative 11, negative 3. So x minus 11 equals 0. X minus 3 equals 0. X is equal to 11. X is equal to 3. Now I have 2 answers, and I have to check to see which ones are going to work. So let's check with, let's see, x equals 11. Sub x equals 11 into this equation. So I got the root of 2, 11 plus 3 minus root 11 minus 2 equals 2. So I'm subbing 11 in to see if it 11. I better make sure that's 11. So that's 11. So that gives me 22 plus 3, that's a 25. Minus 11 minus 2 is 9. 25 minus 3, 2 equals 2. Okay, so x equals 11 is okay. Now we'll work out x equals 3. Let's see what's going to happen when we got x equals 3. So we have 2, 3 plus 3, 3 minus 2. So I will put 3 in the place of x right here. I will put 3 in the place of x here and simplify. That's a 6 plus 3 is a 9. 3 minus 2 is 1. 3 minus 1, 2 equals 2. So, as it happens here, both of them work. So x equals 3 or 11. The two of them will work. Again, sometimes you get extraneous roots, you got to check. And there's 8 marks. So if you have this equation inside of here, give yourself a mark. If you ended up with this simplified, you're squaring it out with right here, give yourself a mark. If you squared it okay, give yourself a mark. If you ended up with this one, you give yourself a mark. And there's all sorts of marks coming all over the place. And you give yourself, if you get these two, a mark each. And if you check them out, you got marks. So there's 8 altogether. Total up your page out of 18. And when you get it done, total up each page and put the mark over 45, convert it to a decimal, divide denominator into numerator, get a decimal, move your decimal 2 places to the right to get your percent. And hopefully everything went well. And again, if there's any errors, the quiz is in the order of my videos. And if you like the video, click the like button, subscribe button, and notification bell. Visit my website, www.mathfullyexplained.com, to find more information about me, my videos, and the content. And that's the content that's on my YouTube channel called Math Fully Explained. Thank you for viewing my video, and this is the end of the unit on the square root equation or radical equation. Thank you. Bye-bye.